Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to everyone uh, joining us for this roundtable on Black Feminist Praxis. My name is Leigh Raiford, and I'm an associate professor of African American Studies here at UC Berkeley. I am the inaugural director of the Black Studies Collaboratory, which is a recipient of a Mellon Foundation's Just Futures grant. The Just Futures grant is a collaborative initiative to address racial inequality through bold and unique humanities-based research projects. And the Global Black Feminism Summer Lab, which is organizing today's roundtable, is one of the programs of the Black Studies Collaboratory. I'm joining you today from Berkeley, California, not too far from the University of California at Berkeley. Both my home and this campus are sited on the territory of the Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone, who are the successors of the historic and sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other familial descendants of the Verona Band. We recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. We acknowledge and pay respect to Muwekma Ohlone ancestors, peoples today, and the Muwekma Ohlone future to come. In acknowledging the Ohlone history of this land, we acknowledge that the Ohlone people are thriving members of the Berkeley community who are actively imagining more just futures and engaging the tools that are needed to do that imaginative work. Whether you are joining us from Ohlone land, from elsewhere on Turtle Island, or elsewhere in the world, thank you for being with us today. Land acknowledgements constitute an effort to name and make visible histories of dispossession, violence, ongoing struggle, resistance, refusal, and also joy that have been erased. And for the Black Studies Collaboratory, we are concerned with history and future, with the history and future of Black life on stolen lands. This is a shared effort. Our project, the Black Studies Collaboratory, asks, what is the role of Black studies in building a more just future? What lessons from Black feminist, Black radical, and Black intellectual traditions can we apply to this moment in history? And how do we solidify our commitment to Black studies as a public good? We are really grateful to the Mellon Foundation for supporting this project. Among our goals for the Black Studies Collaboratory for the next 3 years is to provide space for critical engagement and collaborative dreaming, to create opportunities for joyful and generative engagement among Black faculty, students, and staff, as well as the surrounding community around the country and hopefully around the world. Since receiving the grant in January 2021 and until its conclusion in December 2023, our work in the BSc will consist of academic year think tanks, summer labs for graduate students like the Global Black Feminism Summer Lab, research grants for faculty and students, and a university course open to the public. The Black Futures Retreat, organized in collaboration with a host of community partners, will be the culmination of the initiative. And you can learn more at the department website for African American Studies. I am thrilled that we are gathered here today. And we're going to engage a roundtable on Black Feminist Praxis. I want to welcome you and introduce our lead organizer for the Summer Lab, Tianna Paschel, who is an associate professor of African American Studies and Sociology at UC Berkeley. She's the author of the multiple award-winning book, Becoming Black Political Subjects, Movements in Ethno-Racial Rights in Colombia and Brazil. Tianna is the co-principal investigator of the Black Studies Collaboratory Mellon Grant. Tianna is a dancer, a gardener, a parent, a lover of spreadsheets, deep belly laughs, and also she's an incredible DJ. I have had the great good fortune to work with Tianna on this grant as co-conspirator and comrade dreamer, and I will hand it over to her.
Thank you so much, Leigh. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, boa noite, boa tarde, buenas tardes, buenas noches to everyone here. We are really excited. This is the last day of the Global Black Feminism Summer Lab. And I'd like to first start by thanking Leigh Raiford for dreaming this up with me. It has been a long time coming, and it is more beautiful than I ever thought that it could be. And I just wanted to thank you for taking those leaps with me and dreaming this up with all of us. I'd also like to take a minute to thank some of the other people that made this possible. Barbara Montano, our project manager, has lifted mountains to make this happen, as has Sandy Richmond, Maria del Rosario Heredia, and Lauren Taylor. They have worked tirelessly on this lab and on this collaboratory. Our team here at Berkeley also includes 3 exceptional graduate students, Gilberto Rosa Duran, Delphine Sims, and Rachel Anspach, all of which have helped with the logistics of this lab, but also contributed so much to the envisioning of this, to the shape of it. They helped us conceptualize and put in practice the ethics of care that we hoped very much to center. They asked critical questions about how to live up to the global part of the Global Black Feminism Summer Lab. And the final shape of this program is due to their brilliance and dedication. Thank you so much for thinking with us and making this happen. And one of the things that they helped us think through together was to somehow have a space for all the people who applied to the Summer Lab to be part of the conversation. And so I just want to give a special shout out to all the folks who applied, who are on, who've decided to join us today. And we are so thankful that you're here in this conversation today. So Leigh and I are overjoyed to see this in the world, to see it transpire after dreaming it up many years ago, and in the wake of a number of events organized by students honoring the life, the struggle, and the legacy of Marielle Franco. But this lab, the Summer Lab, and this work in thinking critically with Black feminisms from around the African diaspora is actually a legacy that we both stepped into when we became professors of the Department of African American Studies here at UC Berkeley. From Veve Clark, one of the visionaries behind our doctoral program that centers on African diasporic studies, a program that has always had Black feminism and Black women's knowledges at its center, to June Jordan's poetry for the people and her many, many earth-changing legacies, to Barbara Christian's lasting legacy, which also includes teaching a course on Black feminism in the African diaspora nearly 3 decades ago. So a global Black feminism tradition is what we step into and what we inherit. And so we humbly do this work. And I just want to mention, as I mentioned in the intro, in the opening keynote too, that it's important to remember that Black feminisms from around the globe have been at the center of that legacy, and especially the Caribbean, a place where both, where Barbara Christian, June Jordan, and Veve Clark all had roots. So I'm going to skip forward because I really want to make sure that we have some time to really have a conversation. And I want to thank our 3 mentors who are also our speakers on this keynote panel. We are so thankful for them for saying yes, but we're also thankful to the ways that they showed up this week and brought their whole selves, and also parts of themselves that they didn't need to bring. They didn't bring that too. we the compulsory like being out in the world and bringing our whole selves, we have questioned all week, but they brought some part of themselves that really helped us learn and grow with them. So I'm going to introduce them and then we're going to have a conversation. So we are honored to welcome and to learn from Dr. Moya Bailey, who is probably starting yesterday only. An associate professor in the Department of Communication Studies at Northwestern University. Professor Bailey is an African-American feminist scholar, writer, and activist notable for coining the term misogynoir, which describes a specific form of discrimination experienced by Black women. Moya Bailey's work focuses on marginalized groups, use of digital media to promote social justice as acts of self-affirmation and health promotion. And she's interested in how race, gender, and sexuality are represented in media and medicine. Bailey curates the #TransformDH Tumblr initiative in digital humanities. She's also a digital alchemist for the Octavia E. Butler Legacy Network. Welcome, Moya. We also have Dr. Yomaira Figueroa-Vásquez, who is an associate professor in the Department of English and African American and African Studies at Michigan State University. Professor Figueroa-Vásquez is an Afro-Puerto Rican writer, teacher, and organizer from Hoboken, a place where I feel like you always remind me that Frank Sinatra is also from. She is also an artist and a lover and many things, and I am and a good friend of mine, and so I'm so thankful to have her here. She earned her MA and PhD in comparative ethnic studies. She earned her PhD in comparative ethnic studies at UC Berkeley here, and her BA in English, Puerto Rican studies, and Hispanic Caribbean studies, and women and gender studies at Rutgers, which was like a foreshadowing of all the many departments she would be affiliated with later in her life. She is associate professor of Afro-Diaspora studies at Michigan State, and she is the author of Decolonizing Diasporas, Radical Mappings of Afro-Atlantic Literature, which just came out really and has already made such a mark on this world. So thank you for that work. There are many places where you can see her work published, and I'm gonna skip those because we don't have much time, but she is prolific and we are prolific and rigorous in all the things. Dr. Figueroa is a 2015-2017 Duke University Mellon Mays Fellow, a Ford Fellow, and for this academic year was at Cornell in the Society for the Humanities, or for this year coming up will be a fellow for the Society for the Humanities at Cornell. Welcome to Professor Yomaira Figueroa-Vásquez. And last but not least, we have Dr. Christen Smith, who is an associate professor of African and African diaspora studies and anthropology at UT Austin. Christen Smith's work engages researches in gendered anti-Black state violence and Black community responses to it in Brazil and the Americas. Her work primarily focuses on transnational anti-Black police violence, Black liberation struggles, the paradox of Black citizenship in the Americas, and the dialectic between the enjoyment of Black culture and the killing of Black people. Her book, Afro Paradise, Blackness, Violence, and Performance in Brazil, uses the lens of performance to examine the immediate and long-term impacts of police violence on the Black populations of Salvador, da Bahia in Brazil, and the grassroots movements to denounce and end this violence. Her more recent comparative work examines the lingering deadly impact of police violence on Black women in Brazil and the US. She is the founder of the Cite Black Women Initiative, the dreamer behind the collective and the podcast. And she is one of my big sisters and mentors. And I'm so thankful that you are here. Welcome to our mentors. Today's event is really one where we are gonna ask you to kind of just think about your Black feminist praxis. And we wanna pull on some of the threads that have been so central to this week of reflection and world building and work that we have been doing. So the first question that we like to ask you is if you could tell us a bit about how you came into this work and how Black feminism has kind of shaped your work thus far. And I wanted just to say that not everyone is going to have their cameras on at all times, and that is okay. And that's also a practice that we've had this week for all kinds of reasons, including Black feminist ones, okay? I don't know who wants to get us started.
I think we should go in alphabetical order, huh, Moya?
You know what?
Yes, Dr. Bailey, let's do this.
I just typed Moya in the comments.
That is too funny. So hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here. This has been such a pleasure. I would say that my Black feminist thinking began before I knew to call it that. Something I shared with the group is that attending Spelman College meant that my feminism that I learned was already Black feminist. And so I didn't understand the need while in school to identify it as Black feminism because it already was. It was already mine because of how I learned it and the text through which I really came to understand feminism. I identified as a feminist before coming to college, but it was the Black feminist texts that I read in courses taught by Beverly Guy-Sheftall, in Bahati Kaumba, that really shaped my thinking about what Black feminism is. And it was my organizing that really, on campus, that pushed me to think about that as a scholarly pursuit. So I definitely did not, I came into it through on-campus organizing, and then from there saw that I could apply it to how I thought about scholarship. And Spelman was a really wonderful incubator for that kind of thinking.
Thank you, Moya.
We'll follow the alphabetical. You're saved, Christen. So I would say that the feminism that I like growing up, it didn't really have a name. I saw the shape of it, and I felt it in the practices, and I grew up having a particular kind of skepticism about the way that the world saw my family, like a immigrant or migrating Puerto Rican family, working poor, on welfare, and just like you begin to see the ways that people look at you and conceive of you and your value and the value of your parents. And I had always like an oppositional consciousness to the way that we were perceived and the way that me and my siblings were treated and my parents were treated. And in my mother and my aunt's like constant resistance and constant assertion of their dignity. But I didn't really have a name for that. And, when I went to college, I'm a first generation high school graduate, first generation, college student and graduate. And I was like, unlike Moya, I was like not really down for the feminist thing, because I was like, that's white, like that is the white woman's situation, And so going to Rutgers and being in Douglas College, it's the women's college, it was the women's college of Rutgers, and they were like big on, feminism. And I was just like, you can lose me with all of this, yada, yada, And it wasn't until I started taking classes by Black women in the English department and, taking classes in Puerto Rican and Hispanic Caribbean Studies department and in gender studies that I started to piece it together, but very slowly, right? This is not anything new. This is already something that existed. And it was always part of like my action and the kind of ethical impetus for a lot of the organizing I did, a lot of the work I did in the community. But it wasn't until even later than that, even as I was a grad student organizing for the Women of Color Initiative, I knew that I was a Black feminist. I knew that I believed in the kind of the relational and ethical tenets of women of color feminist politics and practices. But for some reason, it didn't necessarily show up in my work, and it wasn't until I was a professor that I had a conversation and I had finished my book, first draft of my book, manuscripts. And there's a Black feminist philosopher here, Christy Dodson, who asked me about the book, and I was telling her about it. And she was like, well, what's feminist about it? And I was like, well, I'm a fucking feminist. Like, I am a feminist. And if you know me, then you know that like my whole approach to it is feminist. And she was like, well, people don't know you. Like, they don't know you. How are they gonna know that unless you spell it out for them? And then I was like, okay. So then I kind of had to go back and rework the entire project, thinking very differently. It's not just in the action, it's also in the word, right? And so for me, that became this kind of light bulb moment, which is like, if people get to know you in relationship and kinship or community with you, they'll see who you are. But that this also needs to be reflected in the things that we say, because people will read you far beyond your circles. And for me, that's how I came to it. And then that's how it ended up showing up in my work in a very real way, not just as like an undercurrent of like how I approach the topic, but really engaging it like fully on. So yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, that's okay.
Can I chime in? Is that okay?
I think it's okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You think it's okay? You sure?
Oh, you can't see the sarcasm on my face, but yeah.
I cannot.
we are really honored to have you, and yes, you can chime in.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let me just say, everyone, I'm actually I have my camera off because this is the time when I have to go pick up my kids. And so I'm doing that while I'm talking to you, and I'm sharing that with you because I think that has a lot to do with why I'm a Black feminist, because I really firmly believe that we always have to honor not only the way that we show up intellectually, but also our personal lives and the way that gender and sexuality affect our personal lives. And that has a lot to do with people's responsibilities of caretaking often. So for me, my trajectory as a Black feminist really did begin in earnest, I think, in college. And I shared this the other day with the group. But, you know, I had the good fortune of having all of my freshman classes be with Black feminists. And it was something that I had already started to get interested in when I was in high school. Primarily because, and this is something I didn't share with the group this past week, but primarily because I was a poet in high school. And so I was interested in literature and poetry. I was very much a fan of Toni Morrison. I was very much a fan of Alice Walker. And those texts and the work of Black feminist poets really got me through high school in a lot of ways, and got me through kind of some of the trials and tribulations that I think a lot of us go through when we are navigating not only racism, but also sexism. And so for me, it was really kind of natural to take classes with Black women. It was then that I learned about all of the Black feminist scholarship in the world, from like all of the wonderful people that were my mentors at Princeton when I was there, from Gina Dent, most definitely, to, you know, Winnie Lubiano and Toni Morrison and people like that. And so that was when I really got to understand feminism and get to know feminism, particularly Black feminism. Sorry, when I say feminism, I'm like Moya. Moya said this the other day. When I say feminism, it's always Black. And so, so I sometimes forget that. But well, that's how I got to know Black feminism. But I think that in terms of really engaging with Black feminism in my work, it's interesting because listening to you, Yomaira, I realized that when I was in graduate school, a lot of the kind of radical teaching that I got as an undergraduate was very much undone because of the disciplining practice of graduate school and being in a PhD program in anthropology in a traditional department. And what I found was that my voice started to get dampened. I guess that's the best word for it. And it was always, and even though that was happening, it was always in tension with my politics and my desire for Black liberation and my desire to really seek out social justice and equality and things like that. And so I found myself constantly engaging in movements, but not writing about them because it wasn't accepted. And so when I went to Brazil to do my fieldwork as a PhD student, I was very much in Black feminist circles in Brazil because that's where I was the most comfortable. But that's not what I wrote about, primarily because it felt like that wasn't going to be accepted. And it wasn't until I became a tenure track professor and had to deal with some of the misogyny of Black studies, to be really honest with you, that I started to come back to my Black feminism in a much bolder way and a much more audacious way as a scholar. And I think that I share that process because I do think that for many of us, the road to engaging in Black feminism takes on many different forms, and it's influenced by many different aspects of our lives, and it changes over time. It changes shape and it changes form. And so for me, I feel like I'm starting to really become comfortable in being a bold Black feminist scholar in ways that I felt were robbed from me in graduate school. And that has made me feel more whole as a scholar and also helped me to find my voice. And so I think that that's something to just keep in mind, because, you know, as we've been talking this whole week, we talked a lot about how graduate school can take away your voice. And I think that it's just something to remind us that part of Black feminist praxis is helping us to find our voices, helping us to find the way that we can express ourselves and be our whole selves in the world and not have to be censored and silenced.
Thank you, Christen. I mean, that is, you know, actually a perfect segue to the question that we wanted to ask, thinking about, you know, it's like if liberation and a desire, right, to be liberation for everyone and a desire to be our full selves, right, brings us into the work, and yet we find ourselves in these institutions and within the system of academia that doesn't value that, right? Thinking about also other core values, right, of Black feminism, ethics of care, holistic mentorship, an epistemology rooted in believing that knowledge and theorizing comes from multiple locations, right? These are part of a Black feminist ethos that is not the ethos of the academy, right? You know, and so Christen, you started to give us some ways of thinking about how to navigate, right? Like this particular version of double consciousness, in a sense, right? What other? So I'm going to ask you all, what advice could you give to emerging scholars in this field, specifically Black women doing this work, navigating that tension?
Something I got from fellow Black feminist Barbara Ransby was a piece of advice, which is treat the academy like a job, it doesn't feel like a regular job, but it is. So really think about your work hours as 9 to 5 or whatever schedule that is, and don't take it home with you, which can be hard because the work that we do, I think, as feminist scholars is very much connected to our beliefs and our understandings of our purpose in the world. So it can be hard to turn off or know when is the workday over, when this is my life and this is about my people. But I took from her comment a real understanding that the institution is going to be the institution, and that you should not expect the institution to be more than it is. It's a space that gives you the opportunity to do the work that you love, but it is not the work. So that was really helpful to me, and it's something that I've carried with me going forward. And so it's always about what is your work, what is driving you. And I say that also because I do think that there's a pressure within some graduate programs that you want to get the tenure track job or you want to continue down this path. And I don't think that that's true for everyone. And as I understood some of these early iterations of interdisciplinary programs, the hope was that people wouldn't all go into the academy, that we would take the skills and knowledges that we learned in feminist Black studies programs and take it back out into other aspects of society and change where we were. So I really hope that you see the institution as a tool, but you know, it's not the only tool, and also it's not the work. It's something that helps you do what it is that you love.
Moya, I could not agree with you more on that. I think that is exactly what we need to hear. We need to hear it over and over again. I would say, you know, I wrote some bullet points down. And some of them include, when thinking about how much work you are doing, if you're writing or if you're researching, remember that you're adding to something, you're not mastering something. You don't have to say everything that has ever been said about this topic or this person or this region or this time or this place or a piece, right? That desire for mastery is one that is instilled in us in the Kantian university that we are being trained in, and that it feels like our work is never going to be enough and never good enough. But just remember, we are all like one drop, right? One aspect of a tidal wave that's moving forward, right? And so we have to remember that it's something that used to like really mess me up, thinking like I can't ever finish this unless I do the most exhaustive and read anything that everyone has ever said about this one thing before I can even say anything, and address all these things. And so I think oftentimes we take on so much more because we feel like we have that much more to prove and that much more to do. And that's really hard. And because of that, I would say be gentle and kind with yourself. Gift yourself your hobbies. I, went to graduate school and I abandoned all the things I loved. I abandoned my poetry. I abandoned my creative writing. I abandoned my art. All of the years that I was a graduate student, I didn't do any of those things. People would ask me, what are you reading for pleasure? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't read anymore. I only read for seminar, right? And it was totally like, I was totally like automaton, right? Like I must do this, and really disciplining myself, as even my program wasn't a disciplinary program, right? Like, but it's just part of, it's just part of the process. And it wasn't until I went through some really deeply, personal and painful things a few years ago that I was like, what is it that I'm waiting for? What is it that I'm waiting for to live my life, right? And so I think that goes with what Moya is saying. The work is the work and you are your life, right? Like your kinship, your community is your life. So please gift yourself the things that you love to do. And I feel like I'm just starting all over again, remembering who I was before I became a nerd, like super nerd, right? And along with that, engaging in embodied practices. So like take care of your body, because these institutions will wipe you out. They will work you to your last breath, to like the brittleness of your bone. And, I remember wanting to go to Berkeley to work with Vivi Clark, and she passed away my first semester at Berkeley. And very quickly after that, Ron Takaki died, and another professor in the department, Alfred Arteaga, passed away. And so I remember seeing just this happening over and over again and thinking like, oh, wow, I just got here. This is my first year, right? Like, and my first and second year of graduate school. And it's never been more present to me than now, as a like a newly tenured person, like a year, and seeing how just the demands of the institution ramp up. So if you don't create those boundaries for yourself, they won't exist. And then I think the last thing I will say about advice in navigating this tension is, don't get caught up in trying to fix the institution. The institution, it's like a pyramid scheme. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a setup, it's a trap. You're gonna go in there, you're gonna take a seminar, you're gonna be mad at the professor who taught a seminar that had no Black people, no women, no whatever, and then you're gonna try to take it to the top, and then you're gonna try, right? Like, and there's so much value in that struggle. However, it gets played out real quick because you realize that there is so much bigger things that have to happen. And I have a conspiracy theory that I would like to share with you all here today. And that is that the institution is fundamentally a problem, and we know this. It's a fundamentally violent place. And that when you arrive, when they like recruit their new Black, Latina, Indigenous, woman of color professor, they're like, oh my God, we're so happy you're here. Thank goodness. We have this enormous problem. Here's this huge problem that we have, and only you can fix it. And then you kill yourself trying to fix it. They don't want you to fix it. They don't care. And then you either don't get tenure, or you quit, or you die, or you get sick, and then they hire your replacement. And they're like, oh my God, we're so happy you're here. Here's the problem that we've been having. Here it is. Can you fix this problem? And so it's a setup. It is such a setup. And you cannot You cannot get caught up in trying to fix a place that does not want to be fixed. You can make small changes, right, in places. And so some of the advice that I got was, you know, if you step into the job, any job, you can see 100 things that are broken and that need fixing. Just identify 1 or 2 of the things that you can actually address, right? Some of the things that you can actually help, but don't try to transform a place that does not want to be transformed. You will get involved in some of the most corrupt projects that exist. And I think that's it. Okay, thank you.
Woo, okay. I don't know how to follow Yomaira. I'm not gonna do this whole alphabetical order thing anymore. Oh, I don't know how to follow Moya either, though, so I'm in trouble. Gosh, I mean, I think that I feel myself kind of hesitating on this question, because if I'm not mistaken, Yomaira, you just got tenure. Moya, you just got tenure, and I've had tenure for 5 years. And so I've seen the next level of the underbelly. And I think that there's just so much to say that I'm just sitting here thinking to myself where to begin. I agree with everything that has been said. I think that one of the things that I would I will say this. We all always talk about self-care. Talking about it and doing it are 2 very, very different things. And I just want to say that out loud, because I think that at some point right after I got tenure, I took on an administrative position at the university. And literally before I got tenure, one of my senior colleague mentors smelled the blood in the water of tenure and came to me and was like, so you're about to get tenure. Here's the thing we need you to do. Like, it just went up there. And, I wound up doing it because I really care about the project and the students, et cetera, which is, it's all very, very familiar. But one of the things that was really interesting is that once I took that position on, I met a full professor, senior colleague, who became a mentor as well. And when she met me, she said, oh my goodness, you're Christen Smith. You know what's funny? I thought there were 2 of you on campus because you're doing so much that I thought to myself, it is impossible that that is one person. That in it of itself was kind of, it jarred me, but it also gave me pause, because it made me realize that as Black women, we are doing so much. And it's not that we're doing it because we are ignorant of the pitfalls of taking on more work. It is that we are doing it to survive. And I want to be transparent about that. There's a reason why Black women tend to be underpaid in the university, because when they underpay you, they can get you to do more stuff, right? And there's a reason why we tend to be in these service roles, because when they mistreat our students, we tend to do more stuff. When they are constantly engaging in oppressive practices, we tend to do more stuff, because we tend to be like, here, give me that real quick, and so I want us to just be aware. I just want to share with you all that one of the things that I've had to do recently was just take a minute and say, I literally cannot do anything more. And y'all are just gonna have to be okay with that. And that's hard. And I'm saying that here too as well, because a lot of times that lays heavy on students, because students rely very heavily on us, emotionally, intellectually, professionally. And when we take a step back, it almost feels like a personal affront sometimes. But I really want to emphasize to y'all that many of the things that you're going through as graduate students, we all go through as faculty. I don't care what part of faculty you are. You could be, you just got here faculty, you just got tenure faculty, you've been tenured for a long time, you're full, you have an endowed chair. Black women are carrying a lot and are dealing with a lot in terms of mental health, physical health, etc. And so to me, part of our Black feminist praxis has also got to be about taking a minute and taking a pause and taking a step back and thinking about holistic care collectively and intergenerationally. Because I see a lot of us carrying a lot of people, right? And it's not sustainable. And we have to figure out a way to do it in a better way. And we also need to figure it out together, which means we need to think about new models for mentorship. We need to think about new models for community building. And we need to think about new models for creating counter-hegemonic spaces within the institution of the academy, right? Because, you know, Audre Lorde, master student, never managed master's house. You know, y'all heard that a million times, but it's true. And it's like, if we try to do this the way that they tell us to do it, we will die. So how can we do this to support one another and sustain one another, recognizing that we all need to survive in order for this to be okay? Because Black feminism, to me, is not an academic thing. I mean, it's intellectual, but it's not academic, meaning my Black feminism is not contained within the walls of the university. In fact, most of the Black feminist work that I do is like grassroots organizing stuff and collaborating and lifting people up and sending people, you know, food every month and remittances and mutual aid and all kinds of stuff that never makes Twitter, never makes Facebook, never makes Instagram, never makes Clubhouse or whatever else you got. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so how do we create a sustainable model that includes our intellectual selves, our organizer selves, and our personal selves so that we all get free? That's what I think is the task, and that's the advice that I have.
Thank you so much for that. We actually, as the next question, was going to ask about this question of how you take care of yourself. You know, one of the things that both Leigh and I in this initiative have sort of had an ambivalence about is the whole term labor of love, right? Like, as Black feminists, we understand that there's care work and emotional labor that we stay doing, but the university stays like requiring, but also not valuing, right? And so we understand that that is part of the work, but we, you know, we go back and forth between like how to kind of think about what that work is and not to fall into like over romanticizing what that work is and not sort of thinking through the exhaustion that comes with those labors of love, right? There's something about something being a labor of love, like everything is fine, people aren't sick, people aren't all the things, exhausted, right? Emotionally spent, if you talk about it in that way sometimes. And so we wanted to know if, you know, I heard a thread with Yomaira talking about your art practice, talking about all of those things that make you who you are and who you take, like the ways in which you take care of yourself being sort of sidelined and pushed out of you and beat out of you. And like, I guess I wanted to know if any of you wanted to say a little more about how you do take care of yourself, or how you call in folks to take care of you specifically. And, you know, along the lines of what Christen said around, like, we say self-care, but that's not the same as doing self-care. I wanna, if you decide to take us up on this question, I want you to tell us what you do, because I say self-care a lot, and I do it much less.
Something I really enjoy, and perhaps one of you graduate students can help me with this. There's a meme that was going around, or a little video, and it's people doing the voiceover TikTok thing to this person saying, I do not dream of labor. You know, I do not, you know, people asking you what your dream job is, right? And so that has been memes and things that we create have been so important to me in my mental health, and keep me buoyed in all of the foolishness of this world and of the institution. And so I definitely think that Leigh's point about there being a difference between the work and then a job. So I have a job, but the job is not the work. And also to take it to organizing and nonprofit spaces, I also think that's one of the reasons that is so hard, because those things get mixed up, and then it makes it very difficult for us to kind of stay focused on what it is, how we're trying to create the world that we want. So one other way that I stay buoyed that I highly recommend is floating, which is this practice of, you might have heard about it from Steph Curry, but I learned about floating via some very witchy woo-woo folks who suggest it. And float therapy, yes, Bree, is a practice of sensory deprivation. So you're in like a saltwater tank and you just kind of lay back. You can do this in a couple of different ways. There are spots all over the country. You float for anywhere from 60 minutes to more. I can fall asleep in there. I find it so relaxing. I can't swim, and so I was initially very afraid of it, but you will float because the water is so salty. You will float. So floating has been a really wonderful practice for me that keeps me centered, and I just love it.
I'm gonna jump in, and I put in the comments that I did the salt bath once and my hair got real messed up. So I want to do it again, but I need a swim cap. It was not a game. It was rough walking out of there. It's like, anyway, I wanted to say, so there's practices, right, that we can do. Like I love yoga, but I'm like an inconsistent practitioner of it. So I think sometimes when you think self-care, like this is something that I do every day, and I wish I was that person. And I think I've had to learn to forgive myself for not always being like my own best friend, you know, and just being thankful when I do go back into doing yoga. Or last summer when I got tenure, I bought myself roller skates. It was like I felt very fearless, you know. So I bought myself roller skates, all the pads, the helmet. And this year I haven't roller skated since the weather turned, because this year for some reason I'm really scared. You know, I was like, what was I thinking last year? I was like, well, it's roller skating on the hill. Like, what was happening, you know? So I also love to ride my bike and all that stuff. But I think one of the, and obviously I'm dabbling and trying to learn different methods of doing artwork and all types of stuff. And that's been important to me to carve out that time. So there's these practices, but there's also like the guilt associated with it. And that's what I wanted to talk about, which is like, you're sitting here and you are like maybe watching Netflix or painting your toes or doing something else, and you're like, damn, I should be writing. oh, I should be reading, I should be this, I should be that. And then on top of that, you have the being, if you're coming from like a working class or working poor background, you know, different kind of SES status, then the struggle and the privilege, right? Like, so it's like, you know, you might be having a difficult time in graduate school, you might be, you know, struggling in some ways, but then you think about your family. And for me, that's always been like a constant thing. Like, how can I complain if all I have to do is read these books this week? Like, my family is out here struggling. Like, stop being a pendeja, you know? At the same time, I really had to reckon with the fact that it was really hard. And you know, graduate school, you can get depressed, like shit happens, right? And so for me, being able to contend with the privileges that come around with graduate school, even as we're struggling as Black women in institutions that do not love us, right? So thinking about like taking advantage of healthcare, of the free food at events. I mean, all these kinds of small things like access to technology and resources, ability to travel, all these things that, you know, might not be easy for our communities. It's really hard to then turn around and gift yourself the time to take care of your body, to do things that are important to you, to read a book that's not related to grad school or whatever fun thing you love. And one of the things that I really love to do is I love to give gifts. I love sending gifts in the mail. It is like my favorite thing. And I love surprising my friends with stuff. And you know, it's really exciting. I don't know, I just love it. I love it. There's like a whole other background story to that. But one of the things that I started to do this year also is like my big thing since the pandemic is like I love sending edible arrangements to people, because it's like this is the gift that keeps on. It's like fruit. It's everyone loves it, and so everybody's been making fun of me because I just keep like, you bought a house, you know, your cat passed away, you're having a rough day, like this thing didn't go well, or you got this new job, that's great. Everyone's getting a fucking edible arrangement. Everybody's getting fruit, and then yes, I'm definitely a Taurus. And then one of the things that I started to do was I tried one at my friend's house that I had sent to her, and I, you know, stopped by and she was like, it's really good. And I was like, this is delicious. And then during the pandemic, I sent myself an edible arrangement twice. And the game, and I was like, oh my God. And I sent it to myself from my dog, you know, I was like, oh, this is so sweet. Anyway, like just stupid stuff. It was amazing. And that's all that was on my notes. Thank you.
Okay, I hate following Yomaira, man. Okay, so yeah, edible arrangements sound amazing. You know, I think just kind of piggyback on what folk have already said, I think what I would like to add is that, you know, there's a ubiquity of conversation around self-care that makes it seem that self-care has to look a certain kind of way. That has always unsettled me, because it's as if you're a rigorous academic and you're not doing yoga as your self-care, then you're not really woke. And I am so not here for that. So I really want to kind of talk, I do the kind of traditional self-care, which is like I take walks every morning, I try to exercise, I do yoga when I feel like doing yoga. You know what I'm saying? I meditate, all that stuff that's cute and wonderful. But in addition to that, I do things that are just like, you know, regular stuff that I want to do, right? So for example, I really like getting books from my public library. I know I have a library card at the university. I don't care. I want the books from the public library. And I want my little books that don't have anything to do with anything. So I have two genres. I have my complete science fiction, because I'm such a science fiction person. I love science fiction. And so anything science fiction, if it's got like an alien or anything else, I'm here for it. And so I love reading that stuff. And I like to get books and just kind of read them. And they usually have no nutritional value whatsoever, right? So it's like, don't go looking for the thread that talks about politics. That I love Octavia Butler too. But in addition to Octavia Butler, I read people who just don't have anything to do with anything. So that's one thing that I do. I also really enjoy watching foreign series, meaning foreign, meaning not from the US, like things that have subtitles on Netflix. I really like it. My favorite are the Turkish science fiction series. I love them. They're amazing. Okay. And I watch them all the time. I really like the ones from Sweden too. I love some of the ones, and it depends on the genre. So I watch all those things. I really, really like South African action films. And so I watch those as well. I know it's like all this kind of hodgepodge. Like I'm saying, I'm doing the counter narrative of self-care. Like what do people not talk about with self-care? I also like to go and just kind of like hang out with my kids. So one of the things that I started to do lately, one, you know, I have 2 kids, they're 8 and 10. And part of the collateral damage of the university is that this idea that you're supposed to be working all the time, when you have other people in your household to take care of, that really doesn't go very well with them, which can be difficult because there's times when I have deadlines and things I have to do. And I'm like, they're like, come play with me. And I'm like, nah, I got to finish this thing. And that hurts my heart. So I'm trying to figure out ways to just put up boundaries so that the university work doesn't spill over into the rest of my life. And so, for example, because it's so hot here, we wake up and when they're not in camp or school, we go to the playground at like 9 o'clock in the morning. And we do that and then we do a fun activity that's like an adventure activity. And we do that from like 9 to 12. And then we come home and they're like tired and stuff. And I let them watch video games because that is also my self-care. Okay. Because it means I don't have to watch them all the time. And then I do my work. And so trying to set up boundaries, I try to preserve my weekends as much as possible. I go to bed by like 10 o'clock at the latest because I'm up by 5. And so I don't do anything after 10 o'clock. And I don't do work before 9 a.m., maybe 8:30, right? And so those are the ways that I take care of myself, is by really trying to switch one thing off and switch another thing on so that everything doesn't bleed together, because it's really, really easy, especially this past year and a half with the pandemic and working from home. You know, the first couple months, I was like doing laundry and in a meeting and making dinner. And I mean, I was like doing everything at the same time so setting up these time boundaries, I think too, is very much self-care, but I try to do boundaries with care as well. Meaning I try not to be mean and cruel when people violate my boundaries and they don't know that they're boundaries. Because I find that to be difficult. Because I think, you know, I try not to be unkind with people, right? Because sometimes people will email you and you're not answering email right now. Instead of getting mad, I just don't answer it until it's time for me to answer, right? Or somebody calls me or texts me and I'm not there for that, then I don't respond, or I'd say, hey, I'm gonna respond to you this time. So I'm trying to create kind boundaries, right? Does that make sense?
Christen, I love that, because when I was of my first year here, I was like emailing people and I stay up really late. And you do it whenever you can. So I would send email, and I remember sending to 2 of my colleagues, like sending an email like on a Saturday night, and they would be like, I don't respond to email on a, okay, girl, then don't respond. Why are you responding with this then? Like, I don't know, and so then it made me learn, like, to, if I get an email that I don't want to respond to, that it's in an inopportune time, I'm like, you know what? Namaste. It's okay. I'm gonna get to it when I get to it. So, and instead of like lashing out, because people don't know what they don't know,
Thank you so much.
Relatedly, I just wanted to say that I also schedule email, because I'm like, I don't want you to know what time I'm sending this. You don't need to know that I'm doing this at this time. You're gonna get this between 9 and 5 business hours, and that will be great. And one last thing, to Yomaira's point about feeling guilty for self-care. I just want to encourage us to remember that our ancestors don't want us to feel guilty for taking care of ourselves. Like, they did what they did to get us here, and it does not serve us and the people and the communities that we're coming from. It does not serve them for us to be depleted. We have an opportunity because of the privilege that we've been afforded via our education and whatever, and it does not serve them to not take advantage of those particular privileges.
Thank you so much for that. Yes. And I also want to say that one of the things that we've been talking a lot about in this during this week is our spiritual practices and the sacred, and these forms that could be thought of as some form of self-care or us care or we care, that we are not always allowed to, that aren't always welcome in academic spaces, but that I'm sure form part of many of our practices in different ways. Yes, I think Leigh. Oh, yes, we're gonna open it up.
Just want to open it up.
Yeah, so we want to open it up to students, emerging scholars who are on this call, to ask the mentors anything in this vein. You can put in the chat, or you can ask a question. And of course, we have many more questions, but we want to make sure that we get y'all in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe use the hand raise function. That'll be the easiest way to find you, because we have 29 people on the call, which is nice.
Hi, everyone. Can I just speak? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay,
Barbara, can we, I'm so sorry, one second, Vanessa. Can we put it on what is it called? The gallery view at this point? I think that would be great. Thank you so much. Okay, you can go, Vanessa. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I don't really know if it fits into, well, I'll just say it the way it is. So I'm a woman of color, but I'm also from Germany. So so for me, self-care is a Friday night in Munich in your company. I've never in my whole life been in the company of so many Black women at the same time. And so that is really amazing for me to just hear your voices that way. And I don't know, I'm really touched. So thank you for everything you're saying, and continue your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Any other questions or comments, reflections? For folks who've been with us all week, you know that I have a problem with silence.
I was like, let me jump in to.
Yes, I'm gonna have you jump in. Thank you.
To alleviate some of Tianna's clear discomfort with this silence. Actually, one of the things I learned in teaching is that I would ask a question and then I would drink water and wait till somebody answered. And so I both got hydrated and dealt with the silence, and then let somebody else's like jump in. But I love this conversation about praxis and the fullness of Black feminism in all aspects of our lives. And so the question I want to ask, not only, and I'm going to pose it not just to our panelists, but to everyone, is about dreams. And that has been something that Tianna and I have really been working just to like cultivate in ourselves, right? Just to be open to dreaming and just saying like, well, what could it be? And then why not make it? And so just asking folks, what are some dream projects that you have, dream collaborations and dreams both inside and beyond the Academy and its ivory towers?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because Tianna and Leigh, I'm going to be so insistent about collaborations, because I just want to hang out all the time now. And I have so many ideas. And one of them that I have been thinking about for a while is a Flowers Now project. So Flowers Now for Black feminists who we love, and a way to give people their props while they're still here. So whether that's, money, whether that's whatever it is, Flowers Now for Black feminists who have come before, and that they don't have to do anything to get that. I feel like I've been so frustrated by some of the granting and fellowship projects that really box out our elders because it's all online. There's a number of forms and things that you have to do. I just think that there should be easier ways to get people their flowers now. So I would love a dream project for me would be figuring out how this global Black feminisms project can give our elders and also people who are in tough economic situations who we've benefited from their work, get them their flowers now.
So beautiful. And yes to collaborations, always and forever.
I can so see in Yomaira's eyes edible flowers.
Sorry, I'm not muted.
And it comes with a check. You know what I'm saying?
You don't have to be muted.
You
Yeah,
put some
check.
coins.
Yes.
An edible arrangement and a check.
And a check. Yes.
It could be edibles, edible arrangements, and a check, like all of it together.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Okay, so I want to say in terms of dreams, I am obsessed with that, Moya. I love that so much. And one of my favorite things to do is to take as many resources as possible from these institutions and to redirect them. It is what I feel like I've been put in this job to do, right? To just, as best I can, just take, and redistribute. I am thinking about, okay, so there's a few things. So one of the dream projects that I'm working on now is Electric Marronage. I feel so blessed to be able to do that work and how it has grown so organically, and the folks that we get to be in conversation with. And it I talked a little bit about this during the summer lab, but I have been really, one of the things that has been really important to me is mentorship and beyond the institution. So that's one of the ways that I was able to, talk to the folks in my institution to help fund some of the stuff, which is really uplifting voices that are inside and outside of the Academy. So that has been important to me. I think there's a lot of other kind of intersecting work that I've done. But okay, so I just wanted to say one quick thing. I'm really right now really geeked about digital and material projects, not just DH and not just in person, right? That offer the possibility of multiple modes of storytelling, and getting folks into communities, into their own families. I feel well, let me finish that thought. Getting folks into communities to revisit or visit their family archives, to get stories, photos, etc., and to look at even existing archives with a new lens, and to either offer those to the public or keep it private, right? Really think radically about who gets to see what kind of information, but to be able to facilitate that kind of work, because, and this is something that I wanted to say earlier today in the publishing workshop, is that oftentimes the projects, or I feel in my moment and even before my moment, like the first book that you do is the book that you have to do. It's the book that your dissertation is on. It's the, you know, the book that you did the research for, that you had to like, you know, pass snuff and all that stuff. And then the second book, for me, it seems, is like that heart work. And right now I'm working on my second book, and it is for my family. It is like so deeply interconnected. And I would love to, like, I dream of like creating the space, the lab, the whatever, the incubators for our students to know that they don't have to put their hard work second, right? I never want anyone else to be in the position where, you know, you feel like you have to do XYZ thing. And even though, like I said, I love my first book and I love it all, this second book is this whole different thing. And I just dream of being able to create something so that we can really push that forward and make it possible, new patterns of existing within the academy and outside of it. So I think I have a lot more, but that's basically it.
That's so cool. I'm ready to see these projects, by the way, because flowers and edible flowers would be really amazing. And then I think, you know, you're talking about the digital storytelling, and I think Electric Modernage does such a good job of that on the site that I just can't wait to see what else you're gonna do with it. You know, as we're talking, I'm realizing that part of what makes the work that we do so layered and complex is that a lot of it we do get done in the academy, even when it's dreaming outside the academy. And what do I mean by that? So, you know, one of the things like that I'm really passionate about and working on right now is getting Black women's work from Latin America more recognized on multiple levels. And so from translation, which is what translation, and not only translation, but situating, because I think that sometimes people think, oh, translation, you just give what's already published to the publisher, have them translate it, and then boom, why are you taking so much time with this? But really thinking about translation as collaborative dialogic work is something that is very much a part of what I'm dreaming about right now. So it's like, how do you sit down and create communities of Black women across space to kind of redistribute resources, and going back to what Yomaira just said, and, you know, create spaces that are equitable and that are nourishing, intellectually and soul nourishing in that way, right? And so one of the things that I have been, you know, kind of dreaming about is creating like spaces where Black women from across Latin America can come together and think in ways that allow us to develop collaborative political projects and ideas for the future, et cetera, because that sounds really familiar to us here in the US, but that's not something that people have a lot of access to outside of the US. And so especially thinking about Black futures, right? Thinking about collaborations between artists and, you know, organizers and writers and poets and all those kinds of things, and creating spaces like that. And so that's one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about and working a lot towards. And also, you know, oddly enough, for me, I've always wanted to be a writer, like since I was a child. And basically all of the things that you might have just said about the constrictions have made it difficult for me to write the way I want to write. And especially mixing that together with my poetry and my artistic work, which nobody knows about because I don't talk about it. But it exists, you know what I'm saying? And that to me is one of my dreams, is to kind of like bring all of these things together and be able to just do the artistic work and be in conversation with folk and create spaces of conversation. And I think, you know, for me, like interestingly enough, like doing the Site Black Women podcast was a dream for me. And it's been something that I've loved because I love being in conversation with people and I love talking to people and I love talking to people about their work and just getting to know people and all those kinds of things. And so we're in the process of doing some things that are taking that in a whole different kind of cool, funky direction that is going to be really interesting. This is the beauty of collaborative and collective work. It's like folk are like making a collage out there. And so those are the things that I'm dreaming about. But I also realize as we're talking, I'm like, you know, part of what is really cool is that sometimes you sit there and your dreams are just constantly, you know, developing and being and emerging and in conversation with people. And so I think about all of the ways that, you know, doing kind of like creating spaces of collaborative Black feminist spaces in Brazil, for example, how it just comes together on a weekend where we all go, well, let's go over here and let's meet here and let's bring people from these neighborhoods and let's do this and let's do that. And so to me, that is also part of the dreaming process is the ad-libbing and the improvisation of it.
Thank you so much for that. I want to lift up like these intertwined dreams that are being put out on the chat. Castriela says that she's working with friends to create a Black feminism school on the Caribbean coast of Colombia. And I want to put that out there. And she said, what activities, readings, and strategies? I'm going to reverse that and say that in the spirit of what Christen just said, we also want to know what readings inspire you and what things we can learn from the organic experiences from there. I want to put out my dream just into the universe that has come directly out of this lab, which is that I want to write a children's book. I've wanted to write one for a long time, and now I finally know what it's about. And it will be, I think Yomaira, you said family archives, and I think I want to write a children's book that's about cultivating nourishment and food, and as a migration story from Malvern, Arkansas, from the African continent to Malvern, Arkansas, to Flint, Michigan, to the Bay. And I think I want to write that with my aunties and my grandma. So I just put that out there as a possible collaboration too. And yes, Christen, to all the real ways that we need to make this more than 3 years of a grant, and we need to dream this up in the ethos of like what we've come up with, thinking about creating a space that's more permanent than just whatever whatever a grant allows us. So and I love all the hearts. Yes, I'm writing that book, y'all. I'm writing it. I'm putting it out there. And there will be a Black feminism school on the Caribbean coast of Colombia. And there will be spaces for Black feminists from Latin America to get together and have some respite and think together and dream together. There will be all of these things because we're putting it in the universe, okay? And we are doing the work and we are collaborating and we are not alone in doing this work. I want to thank y'all for being here. I think that this is the end, right? Leigh, do you want to say something in closing?
I'm afraid to speak because I'm just so like I just feel like everything is vibrating in like, you know, in my mind, in my soul, in my hands, and I'm just so grateful that we're all here. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for dreaming with us.